I used to believe my life was ordinary, predictable, almost invisible in its simplicity. To most people, I was just another man driving an aging truck to a city job. A man who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with trimmed hedges and maples that flamed orange in the fall. My name is Elias Thorne. I am 40 years old, and until recently, I thought my unremarkable routine was enough to keep my world steady. But life has a way of testing the strength of the walls you build, and mine were about to collapse in ways I could never have imagined. My mornings always began the same way. I would wake before the sun, shuffle into the kitchen, and listen to the soft hum of the coffee maker, as it filled the room with the scent of roasted beans. The ritual was comforting, almost sacred. I would stand by the counter, buttering plain toast, staring out the window at the prairies that stretched beyond the neighborhood. The fields rolled on endlessly, reminding me of my childhood on my parents' farm, a place where the horizon was always within reach, but never yours to hold. By 6:30, I would be dressed in one of my worn button-up shirts, a tie that had seen better days, and the same pair of slacks I had rotated through for years. Some might have thought I was careless or unwilling to keep up appearances, but I saw it differently. I valued quiet comfort over vanity. When I slid into my old Chevy truck, its engine sputtering to life like a grumpy companion, I always felt a sense of loyalty to it. That truck had carried me through storms, through long commutes, and even through late-night drives, when the weight of life pressed down too hard to sleep. My job was as dull as the beige walls of the finance office, where I spent most of my days. Endless spreadsheets, endless ticking clocks, endless chatter about promotions that never reached me. But I didn't mind, not entirely. I wasn't chasing titles or applause. What mattered most waited for me at home. Lucas. My son was 8 years old, with a mop of auburn curls that always refused to stay tamed, and eyes so green they reminded me of summer grass after the rain. Lucas was my anchor, the one steady flame in a life that sometimes felt dim. He loved to draw, landscapes, mostly. Rolling fields, rivers bending like ribbons, and wide skies dotted with clouds. I would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching him sketch with a focus that made me smile. He had inherited my quietness, but not my restraint. Where I had learned to bury my emotions, Lucas let his heart spill onto paper with every line of his pencil. It was for him that I endured everything else: the disapproving in-laws, the coldness creeping into my marriage, the whispers that I was a man without ambition. My wife, Sophia, was once the warmth in my life. She was beautiful, vibrant, and full of charm. When we first met, she had seen something in me others did not. Or at least I thought she did. But over the years, something changed. Perhaps it was her work managing a luxury resort, constantly surrounded by the city's elite. Perhaps it was her parents' voices in her ear, reminding her that she had married beneath her station. Her father, Reginald Harrington, was the kind of man who filled every room with his presence. Tall, broad, and forever dressed in tailored suits, he carried himself like a king among peasants. He owned swaths of Topeka through his real estate empire, and never let me forget that the house I lived in belonged to his portfolio. At family gatherings, he would lean back in his chair, sip his wine, and say things like, "You should really think about moving up, Elias. Sophia deserves someone who aspires to more." Her mother, Evelyn, was no less harsh, though her weapons were sharper in their subtlety. She ran a boutique that catered to the city's wealthiest women, dressing them for galas and charity balls. She would glance at my outdated clothes and smile sweetly before asking questions that cut like knives. "Elias, don't you ever feel stuck?" Isn't accounting such a small pond for a man your age? Then there was Marcus, Sophia's brother, who never missed a chance to belittle me. Face it, Elias, he would say with a smirk. You're just along for the ride. Dad's the one who really takes care of Sophia. For a long time, I let their words roll off my back. I told myself that humility was strength, that ignoring their scorn was better than fighting it. After all, I had a secret they knew nothing about. Beneath my modest exterior, I had built something they could never take from me. Late nights, after Lucas was asleep and Sophia was lost in her own world, I studied markets. I invested carefully, quietly, and over the years, I grew wealthier than any of them could imagine. I didn't flaunt it because I didn't need to. My fortune wasn't for show, it was for security, for Lucas, for the peace of knowing I could stand tall if I ever had to. But even the best laid foundations can crumble. It began one crisp autumn morning. The maples outside had turned a fiery red, and the air carried that faint chill that makes you reach for an extra layer. Lucas sat at the breakfast table, his head resting on his hand. His usual chatter was gone. Dad, my head hurts, he whispered, his face pale. I smiled softly, ruffling his curls. Probably just tired, buddy. You were up late drawing last night, remember? He nodded, but the sparkle in his eyes was dim. By afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. His school said he had collapsed. My heart stopped. I drove like a madman in that old Chevy, its engine groaning as if it, too, understood the urgency. When I reached the hospital, the world tilted beneath me. The doctor's words came like hammers. Late-stage brain tumor. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. How could an 8-year-old, full of life and dreams, be facing something so cruel? Sophia arrived hours later, her perfume filling the sterile room. She looked concerned, yes, but distant, like her mind was already elsewhere. She stayed only briefly, muttering something about a meeting she couldn't miss. In the days that followed, I never left Lucas's side. I watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his drawings slow until the pencil slipped from his fingers. He would look up at me and whisper, "Dad, can we go home? I just want to draw in the porch light again." My heart shattered each time, but I forced a smile, telling him stories of prairies and rivers, promising that one day we would sit there again, the Harringtons visited now and then, their presence more burden than comfort. Reginald's words stung the most. Did you even take him for regular checkups, Elias? Or were you too busy living small? Evelyn would sigh dramatically, saying, "This is why ambition matters. With better care, maybe this wouldn't have happened." I wanted to scream at them, to throw them out, but I stayed silent for Lucas's sake. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the tall windows of the mansion, painting golden lines across the polished floor. For the first time in months, I woke up warm, clean, and fed. Yet comfort didn't bring peace. It brought purpose. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, inhaling the rich aroma that reminded me of mornings long ago, when I used to sit at my kitchen table, waiting for Alexander to wake up for school. But those memories no longer brought warmth. They burned. After finishing my coffee, I walked to the study where my brother James's safe was hidden behind a framed painting. My heart pounded as I turned the dial, each click echoing in the silent room. When the lock released, I pulled open the heavy door and stared at what was inside: folders, envelopes, photographs, and several USB drives, each neatly labeled. I carried everything to the desk and began to read. The first folder contained copies of the documents I had signed, the same ones that had cost me everything. But this time, I could see the truth clearly. The clauses were twisted, written in language meant to confuse. My signature sat beside lines that handed full control of my finances and home to Alexander. Every page was a trap disguised as protection. God, how could I have been so blind? I whispered. The next folder held photographs, grainy but clear enough to make my stomach turn. Alexander sitting in a restaurant, laughing with the same lawyers who had tricked me. Rebecca beside him, raising a glass of champagne. The date on the photo was only 2 days after I had signed those papers. Then came the audio recordings. My hand shook as I pressed play. Alexander's voice filled the room, low and impatient. Make it sound complicated but legal. Mom will sign, she always trusts me. Then Rebecca's voice followed, sharp and mocking. She's had that house long enough. It's wasted on her. We'll finally have something to show for all your sacrifices. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall, listening to the echo of their betrayal. The ache in my chest was heavy, but beneath it, something else stirred, a slow, burning strength. James had known. That's why he'd left me this task. He wanted me to see the truth with my own eyes, to reclaim not only what I lost, but the part of myself I'd buried beneath years of blind love. 2 days later, there was a knock at the front door. When I opened the curtains, my heart froze. Alexander and Rebecca stood outside, perfectly dressed, pretending confidence. Mom. We know you're in there. Alexander shouted. We need to talk. I didn't open the door. There's nothing left to say, I replied firmly. Rebecca's voice was colder. You think that inheritance is yours? We'll contest it. Uncle James was delusional. You'll lose again. Their words no longer hurt me, they revealed who they had become. I watched them leave, then turned away from the window. The fear that once paralyzed me was gone. For the first time in years, I felt power in my hands again. With Robert's help, I spent the next few weeks gathering everything into order: documents, recordings, photographs, witness statements. The more we organized, the clearer the picture became. Years of manipulation, secret debts, and lies. Alexander had been drowning in gambling debts. He'd taken loans from dangerous people and used me as his escape route. The lawyers were bribed, the witnesses false, the story carefully spun until the world believed I was too confused to handle my own affairs. One evening, while reviewing papers, I found something I hadn't expected: a small wooden box with my name carved on the lid. Inside were letters from James, written over the years but never sent. The first was dated 15 years ago. Sophia, I wish I could undo our fight. You raised me when we lost our parents. You gave up your dreams so I could chase mine. I never thanked you properly. Another, written more recently, read: I see Alexander changing, and it worries me. Please be careful, sister. You give too much, and people take advantage of hearts like yours. By the last letter, his handwriting had weakened. You deserve justice, not revenge. If I'm gone, let this be your chance to rise again. Remember who you are, Sophia, you are strength itself. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I clutched the final letter to my chest. Thank you, James, I whispered. I won't waste this second chance. With every passing day, I felt my confidence grow. I was no longer the broken woman who slept on a park bench. I was the mother who had survived heartbreak, the sister who was reclaiming her dignity, and the woman determined to make things right. Robert and I arranged a meeting with Alexander and Rebecca. We invited them to the mansion under the guise of resolving the inheritance dispute. The dining room was set for confrontation, papers neatly stacked, a fraud expert and notary seated nearby. At exactly 10 in the morning, the door opened. Alexander walked in, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. Rebecca followed, expression smug. They were joined by their lawyers, the same ones who had taken everything from me. I stood tall at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," I said calmly. "You've accused me of fraud and manipulation. It's time you hear the truth." Robert opened the first folder. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Photos of secret meetings. Recordings of their voices. Witness statements of bribes and false claims. The fraud expert explained every detail with precision. Silence filled the room. Rebecca's expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief. Alexander's hands trembled. "This is illegal," he shouted suddenly. "It's all documented and verified," Robert replied. "You can challenge it, but the law won't be on your side." I looked at my son, the man I once believed could do no wrong. "You left me homeless," I said softly. "You took everything your father and I built. You called me greedy while you spent the money meant for your future." Alexander looked down, his voice breaking. "I was desperate, Mom. I didn't know what else to do." "You knew," I said quietly. "You just didn't care." I took a deep breath. "I could take you to court for fraud and elder abuse. You'd face years in prison. But I won't. Instead, I'm giving you a choice: confess publicly, return what's mine, and apologize. That's how you begin to make things right." 3 days later, Alexander came back alone. His eyes were swollen from sleepless nights. "I'll do it," he said simply. "I'll make it right." He kept his word. The next morning, he signed documents returning my assets and made a public statement admitting his wrongdoing. Rebecca left him soon after, her pride shattered. As for me, I sold James's mansion and used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for elderly people who had suffered from financial exploitation. I kept my old home, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that even when the world takes everything, resilience can rebuild it. Months later, I visited James's grave. The sun was warm on my face, and the air smelled of spring. "You were right, brother," I whispered. "Justice doesn't need revenge, it needs truth." I stood there for a long time, feeling peace settle over me. The woman who once lost everything had finally reclaimed her life.